the Tigers won at home. Like that's the key. That's part of the key to the excitement downtown. It's when you come home in front of your hometown fans, you take care of business.
Yeah.
This is not only a series that the Tigers needed, but the fact that it was home, where actually they've struggled. If you extrapolate it, that's a long word. Extrapolate it over the last 2 seasons, they struggle more at home than away, and I don't necessarily know what the reason are. It's becoming a large enough sample size where there is something to it, but not only to be able to come home and win this series 3-4 against the Blue Jays, but to do it after losing a horrible Friday game. Like, Friday was no bueno.
I think everybody was a little down.
Yeah, like big time.
Yeah.
Thursday, my fault. Thursday, it was a 4-game. You knew what I was talking about.
Was a little down.
The 9-1 loss.
Yeah, when Flannel said stick a fork in them. Now, look, we've told you here on this platform, we're going to cover the team in 2 kind of directions. One is game by game. The other one, though, is expectations. And one thing that I do, week by week, especially after these losing streaks, they're in the midst of like a 2 or 3 game losing streak, and I asked you before, does this change your expectations for the Detroit Tigers? And you know what you told me? No, it does not.
No.
I think the what makes this look a little bit worse when they go through the losing stretches is that the AL Central is much better than any of us thought it was heading into the season. But as things stand right now, the Detroit Tigers are 26-27 after 53 games.
Yeah.
That's
there's still 109 games left in the season.
Yeah. And the bats, they're starting to put up some runs more consistently or more in clusters than we saw in the beginning of the season. You want to see this thing get more consistent. You don't want to see it be something where it's like late in the game. Now all of a sudden people are hitting multiple home runs and they're having to come back, take the lead and things. You want to see this be something that's consistent throughout the game. But
that's the key.
You talk about the Tigers.
No, that is the key. And I'm not ready to jump on and say, man, this offense, they're close to turning it around. I don't know that yet. But yeah. I set this tweet out, and it blew up a little more than I expected. But I don't think that this Tigers team is a bad team. They're 26-27. They're in 4th place in the AL Central, which we thought was going to be a pretty easy division to compete in. But they're like 10 games back from the Guardians at the top. I don't think they're a bad team. I think they have a below-average offense that on certain days looks like the worst offense in the MLB. Like for stretches, looks like the worst offense in the MLB. But they're not. They're just below average. They're just not very good right now. If they can find a way with a very good pitching staff, and again, the bullpen, they're struggling as of late. The whole pitching staff isn't as dominant as it was at the beginning of the season. Yeah. But I put them as a very good pitching staff that sometimes plays average.
And if you're saying that, I will take that to be true.
Do it. Take it. Take it to be truth. If that offense can find a way to be consistently average, like just average, with the staff that they have. That's why I'm so optimistic, and I don't know the long-term strategy. Do they make certain trades this year? Do they are they relying on bringing some guys up? Do they trade a pitcher? Do they trade a hitter? What do they do? I don't know yet, but you can see. And again, this is somehow I got roped into like a Javi Baez supporter, which is so far from the truth. I don't know how this all got intertwined, but I'm going to shout out Javi Baez, Colt Keith, some of these guys who have hit mostly in the second half of the batting order, 5 through 9. When they're hitting with runners in scoring position, when they're able to drive in runs, this entire offense, this entire lineup, it's different. It feels different. It's much more difficult to pitch to. It's a very easy lineup to pitch to if you only got 4 guys to really worry about. And if we're being honest, it's probably 2 or 3 in any given day.
Yeah.
And one thing we saw on Sunday, before the game started, the Tigers had just won 2 in a row after dropping the first game. Game 1 was a pitcher's duel between Jack Flaherty and Kevin Gausman. I remember who pitched against us. We went down to LSU my freshman year at Michigan, and he pitched, and he was an absolute animal, even, what was that, a decade ago? That was a pitcher's duel that the bullpen just fell apart in. They lost 9-1. Game 2, we'll get into a little more. Reese Olson, gem. Absolute gem.
Yeah.
Lowered his ERA to, 1.82? Something like that. I got the stats here. I'll read it off. But Sunday, they ended up winning 14-11. But before the game started, Kerry Carpenter, Colt Keith, and Riley Green were taken out of the lineup. And I think social media went nuts. Like, everyone, including myself. I woke up and I was like, Colt Keith and Kerry Carpenter have been the hottest hitters on this team for the last week, 2, 3 weeks. And I know there's a very good lefty on the mind. You say Kikuchi, who didn't pitch well. He's a very good lefty, and lefties don't hit well. But nonetheless, my thing was, because you're under 500, just play your hot hitters. Give them a chance every couple of lefties to hit against them. Like, how are they going to get better? How's Colt Keith going to get better hitting against lefties if you take him out every time? How's Kerry Carpenter going to continue to improve and build on what's turning into an all-star caliber season if you take him out every time it's a lefty? And I know there are strategic moves and some analytics that play into why you want to keep those guys out, and they end up coming in later in the game and whatnot. But still, to me, sometimes you got to put the analytics down and just play your hot hitters or play your young hitters so they get better.
Yep, and they can get consistent. They can find a rhythm. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but most sports, and I think baseball more than any other, rhythm is very important.
Yes, it is. Yeah. It is, and it's why we want to be patient with some of these young hitters. Like, I don't know if the stats or this has changed in the last 10 years, but as long as I can remember, this sort of baseline number at bats that you want your minor leaguer, that you want your draft picks, your young players to see are like 10,000 at bats in the minor leagues. That's a lot of bats, but that's so those hitters can see pitches. They can see different types of spin. They can get comfortable. They can build habits. They can build off success when they have it by repeating things, by building off their mechanics, whether it's a pitcher or a hitter. But in this case, a hitter, you want to be able to see pitches so you train your eyes. And we're going to see when we talk more about Skubal in the next segment just how difficult it is to hit a major league fastball, especially against someone like Skubal. It's difficult. So these hitters, these young hitters, need to just see as many pitches as possible. That's why we see Colt Keith starting to figure some things out. He's seen big league hitting. He's seen big league pitchers, I should say, and big league pitchers adjusting to his strength and his weaknesses. That's the difference between major league pitchers and AAA, AA, single A. It's the ability to have enough pitches in your repertoire, have enough stuff where you can go at any hitter's weakness with a strength of yours. That's what part of what's made Skubal so good. He now has 3, 4, maybe 5 pitches that are a strength that he can attack hitters with in the strike zone. So it's all about patience. Neil, go ahead. Rip me for being patient. I'm being patient with this team because these young hitters need time. And I'm not saying that means don't make a trade at the trade deadline. I'm not saying don't see if you can compete this year. But for the grand scheme of things, we got to be patient with this team. They're coming.
And your narrative is fit. There's been times when I'm like, dang, this team is 3 games under 500, 4 games. They were 6 games above 500 at some point. They were just a hair out of third place, second place in this division. And it looked like this team was just going to pack it in.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden they're 26 and 27. They just faced the Blue Jays and really put the works on them. Yeah. It's something to behold realistically because I don't think this Tigers team is just done. As you see some of these guys figuring things out is where I'm hoping somewhere within the Tigers organization somebody is listening to Mr. Matthew Broder because I do want to see these guys get the time to be consistent. Shout out to Keys to Wisdom as well. He said Mets are 22 and 30 with over $300 million on the payroll. The Tigers are outdoing them at just over $100 million with $8 million still going to Mickey.
Yeah.
That's pretty wild.
It is pretty wild. That shows you, and is also why some people want them to spend because they're close. Like, imagine if you spent for some bats. I get that. I'm not saying those people are wrong. But just what he said, they're close. And with Javi Baez hitting a little bit or Colt Keith, like, if you just fill out this lineup a little more with this pitching staff, you can compete with anyone. What's good, Justin?
The Mets did the opposite with the Tigers.
You might be muted, possibly. It might also be my headphones, but
I hear you.
Oh, you hear me?
I'm out. Let it fly.
All right. So the Mets, why their payroll is so high though is because when they traded Verlander and they traded Scherzer, they ate a lot of their cap in order for them to get the prospects that they wanted in the elite level. So they ate a bunch of that cap, which is why their payroll is that high. They are not paying a big portion of that salary currently like we are with Miggy and Baez, because Baez is playing okay, but I'll stay.
Yeah, they found a way out of those massive contracts by eating them. Steve Cohen, their owner, ate those contracts, but he ate them so that he could trade those players and get prospects back because they spent way too much money. It didn't work, but they were able to move on from that. You're so right. And Ed O'Neill said in the chat, it was a great connection. We were patient with the 22 Lions. Let's be patient with the 24 Tigers. I feel a lot of that team and this Tigers team just close. They might not make the playoffs, but they're going to be right there. They're coming.
Yeah. I see more of a foundation right now that they can build on. You just hope that this organization takes that seriously. I don't want to see this team have some of the potential and have some of the young players that they do, have the pitching staff that they do, and they waste this thing. They just continue to kind of rest on it. Look, guys, go out there and get this done. And you said connections?
Yes.
You know what? Burn, $5 super chat. Thank you for the super chat. He says, let's be honest, the bats are getting hot because of the city connects. According to Mark Hanna, they're really hot to wear on the field.
Like actually warm?
I don't know.
They're playing well in them. They're playing
well, though.
They got a 2-game series coming up against the Pirates tonight and tomorrow afternoon. They're wearing the City Connects tonight. They're keeping it going.